Tonight, Earth 2 gives you the full history on the Helmet of Fate in excruciating detail. Dial H takes a page out of the Disney Channel movie Sky High's book, and Stormwatch dares to ask a man fully dressed in leather whether or not he's gay. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 79 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and I just want to throw out there at the beginning, I've been pretty good about representing events on this channel. I've brought up the big ones, Death of the Family, Night of the Owls, stuff like that. I've even brought up the smaller ones, the ones that most people gloss over, Black Diamond Probability and Hawkman Wanted. But this month, as a whole, is going to represent one of Requiem, which if you haven't watched the last episode, I'm giving you about 5 seconds before I go ahead and spoil what happens in the big ticket comic of that week. But Damian dies. Damian Wayne Robin straight up bit the dust. And this whole month, in all of the Bat books that make any sense to have it there, they're going to be having a little thing that says Requiem, and it's just kind of a page or two in the book where people are like, oh no, Damian's dead, I'm sad, and then the plot continues on. As such, I'm going to go ahead and ignore this as an event because it doesn't really have a through line. It's just kind of a people recognizing what's happening in the universe thing, and to slap an event label on it and try to like put that all in a playlist eventually, yeah, that doesn't quite sit right with me. So, for moving forward, just know that Requiem is happening this month, and I won't care about it. Anyway, let's talk about comics coming out. So this week we have 13 comics coming out, including, I'm going to lead off with number 17 issue of Superman, which is the final part of Hell on Earth, which got delayed a week, so it better be worth it. Spoiler alert, it's not. Additionally, we have the number 18 issues of Batwing Detective Comics, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Stormwatch, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. We have the number 10 issues of Earth 2, World's Finest, and Dial H. We have the number 6 issue of Phantom Stranger, and we have the number 4 issue and the finale of The Human Bomb. Out of that, Green Lantern's an event. Animal Man and Swamp Thing are kind of wrapping up the Rot World and the plots that they were dealing with overall. Definitely worth checking those out. And, yeah, Green Arrow's still great, so be sure to listen up on that one. But I am spoiling everything right out the gate. I should let you experience it firsthand, or secondhand through me experiencing it firsthand. You know what I mean. Superman, let's hear it. Superman number 17, written by Scott Lobdell, art by Kenneth Rocafort. This is the finale to Hell on Earth, and I guess something kind of theoretically happens. So last issue, Superman got blasted into space by Hell, one of his punches, and we see opening up on Superman crashing into something, and he's like, wait a minute, I'm not even close to the moon. What did I crash into? And it turns out he landed into the Oracle, that giant stone space guy who is making his way to Earth. And the narration here says that he's coming to bear witness to threats to the flow of time and space. So that's his whole thing. And Superman just looks at him and he's like, hey, are you alive? Are you like a thing? Can you talk? And then the Oracle floods his brain with a whole bunch of images of, I guess, before he left Krypton. Like, it just seems to be Krypton stuff. And Clark is like, I don't know what that... Are you telling me Hell makes it back to Krypton? What are you saying here? And then the Oracle just fades away. And he doesn't really ever come back. So that just happened. And Superman's like, all right, well, I got to get back down to Earth, deal with that whole thing. Batman calls in being like, hey, Superman, we've managed to control most of the natural disaster stuff, but like, you really got to take out Hell. And he's like, yeah, thanks. Got it. I'm working on it. So then we go back down to Hell, and finally, as in the last issue, Supergirl learned the truth that Hell is planning on sacrificing a whole bunch of human lives. And he once again makes the point, like, I'm changing the timeline. It's not going to be the same, and they will be alive in the new timeline. And she points out, well, what if you don't succeed? Then they'll all be dead for nothing. And he's like, screw you. I've worked too hard for this. I don't want you anymore. You suck. And we see Superboy and Wonder Woman trying to tear apart his battery thing that's sucking out the sunlight or whatever. And Superboy does end up breaking it apart with his telekinesis, which genuinely surprises Hell. He didn't know that that was even possible. But he's like, all right, whatever. I've already charged up my ship enough. I don't need the battery anymore. So he starts using his telekinetic abilities or whatever he's got. And he's looking for the right portal through time to take his ship through. And who cares? He does, like, every time he talks, he has a monologue of, like, I'm doing this for the lives of millions, no, billions, and none of you can stop me. And everyone just responds with, like, but we will. Just assume that's happening on every page. So at that point, he's about to attack Wonder Woman. Superboy's super weak, but then Superman comes in and just knocks him down and starts throwing in some major punches into him. And apparently the punches are so strong, not only can they be felt in the center of the Earth, they can also be felt in the Watchtower satellite, however many thousands of miles above the Earth. So yeah, that's a thing. And Supergirl, she got knocked out earlier by Hell once he said, I'm done with you. And she lands next to a little shard of kryptonite. And she's like, I know what I must do. So at this point, the ship's still looking through all the time portals or whatnot. And Superman's like, wait a minute. This was your plan all along. You knew Superboy was going to tear apart your battery so that way your ship would have access to these portals. And I'm like, no. 2 pages ago, he was genuinely surprised. He wasn't even talking to anybody. It was just himself. So that's just wrong. You're wrong, Superman. But regardless, Hell then lands a supermassive punch on Superman, knocking him across Antarctica. Superboy and Wonder Woman go up to check in on him, and Hell's like, all right, you know what? Nah, I'm happy I'm killing humans. You all suck. You're the worst. You guys think you're oh so special, but you're not. And I'm happy to be killing you. So I'm out. Screw you all. And as he's about to get into his spaceship, Supergirl's like, wait, Hell. And she's looking super sick. She's like holding her stomach. She's like, bring me with you. And he's like, all right, how could I say no to that face? Yeah, come on in. And Superman's like, no, don't do it. And he wraps them up in some sort of like telekinetic net or something like that. And as Supergirl makes her way in, he's like, you ain't looking so hot. Please don't throw up in the spaceship. And she pulls out the kryptonite shard and shoves it into Hell's chest. I do want to point out that last issue, they made a very special point that Hell had like a Bizarro-style House of L crest carved into his chest. It's gone now. He doesn't have that anymore. It just disappeared. I hate that. So she stabs Hell, and Hell's like, oh, God, do you know what you've done, Kara? And she's like, yes, I've saved this planet. Earth will be spared, even if it means Krypton has to go. And he's like, all right, well, I forgive you for killing me, and I always loved you. And she's like, I don't really care, Hell. You're kind of a dick. So then Superman manages to escape from his binding. Hell seems to fall through a portal in time, and then everything's just fine. Like, apparently, we don't have to fix anything that happened. The world's just gonna be okay. I guess it all dissipated or whatever. But Kara's still extremely ill because she was next to that kryptonite for so long. So Superman picks her up, flies her over to the fortress where she's able to get some medical care. As we see, the Oracle is... I'm just going to read this straight up. If the Oracle could experience motion, its temptation might be to express joy, but it would only be momentary, for the Oracle knows that Superman's actions here today will exact an unspeakable toll on everything Kal-El holds dear, and perhaps one day even the Omniverse itself. I don't believe a damn word of that. But then we get an epilogue of decades ago, 12 years before Krypton explodes. Back on Krypton, Jor-El stumbles into a cave, and inside it is Hell. Yep. Okay. I think the worst part of this event is it took so goddamn long, and I don't even know what the point of it was. Like, I think the only goal of this event was to bring together all the super books because they were all just kind of doing their own things. And it's like, all right, let's get everybody on the same page here so that everyone knows everybody else. And even with all of that, I still don't feel like there's a very good link between Superboy and Supergirl. Like, they didn't really have a moment. They were just always enemies the whole way through. Ugh. The whole Oracle thing, stupid. Hell going through time, like, barely makes any sense. And then that stupid carving on his chest. Did someone just not get the character memo? Was that it? Was somebody drawing this stuff and they're like, oh, I see on this, he has a little backwards crest. But they're like, no, that's version 1.0. We're on version 1.2 now. Get with the times. I don't know. I don't care. This event was stupid. Not the worst thing. I think it had the bare bones of something good, but just way too stretched out and far too few consequences in the end. It just felt like, oh, we don't know how to end it, so Supergirl stabs him. The end. It's like, all right, well, fine, whatever. Overall, I got to give this particular issue. I know it's taking the brunt of the entire event on it, and it's probably not that bad in its own right, but I got to give this one like a 5. It pissed me off knowing that this is where the story all led to, and it just meant nothing. All the way through, all those issues, all those tie-ins, nothing. So yeah, 5 for this. I do not recommend Hell on Earth. Green Lantern number 18, written by Geoff Johns, art by Szymon Kudranski and Ardian Syaf. This is the next part of the Wrath of the First Lantern storyline. And last issue, Simon Baz got sucked into the dead world. Dead zone. Whatever it's called. So he ain't doing so hot. But he met up with Hal and Sinestro. And this basically is just a talking issue where we're like, all right, let's figure out what we got to do here. So we open up on Hal and he's like, oh, hey, who are you? Are you the Green Lantern that, like, we summoned here? And Simon's just catching his bearings and he's like, all right, I can't remember much of anything, including, like, where I am. And Sinestro and Hal basically just start arguing over the fact of, like, this is the guy that was supposed to save us, and now he's in here. So clearly this is all your fault, Jordan. And Jordan's like, well, it could have been your fault. Shut up. So either way, he's starting to remember things. He's like, oh yeah, I was battling a guy named Black Hand, and then something happened. And Sinestro's like, he killed you. You're dead now. And he's like, I'm not dead. I'm here. I'm alive. And he's like, no. But, like, you're in the dead zone. So then he remembers Hal Jordan. The whole reason he was coming here was to try to find Hal Jordan. He's like, hey, I don't know, should I, like, salute or something? Either way, I just hear that you're a big deal. And Sinestro's like, I'm sorry, you hear he's a big deal? Oh, this sucks. I hate you already. And so he shows off the ring, and because he is still wearing the ring and still has some Green Lantern energy in him, he's technically not dead. Like, he's still alive. And so Sinestro takes this in, immediately throws Hal to the side, and starts scrambling after the ring. And he's like, that ring belongs to me. I'm getting out of here. And Hal's like, oh, no. What? You haven't given me any reassurance that you'll be coming back for me afterwards. He's like, yeah, 'cause I won't. You suck, Hal. You've been bringing me down this whole time. But then Simon's like, all right, I'm just going to use the ring to stop you. And he tries using some constructs, but it's not doing anything. Sinestro's just able to tank it, and he calls him out. He's like, oh, the wing is, like, weak. You can't do anything against me. So Simon pulls his gun and shoots Sinestro in the chest, and he's just dead. So then we cut to outside of the dead zone, back in the Chamber of Shadows. All the other Guardians are fighting against Black Hand, along with, I never know how to pronounce his name. I'm going to say Bidge is what I'm going with. So Bidge is like, okay, we just saw Simon get sucked into his ring. We got to open up his ring. So hold him down and let's try to pry him out from there. So that's their end goal on their end. And then we see back inside, Hal's like, oh my god, is Sinestro like dead? And it's like, yeah, we're in the dead zone. We're all dead, but don't worry, he's going to come back. And Sinestro sits up again. And Simon's like, hey, sorry about that. Just, force of habit, whatever. And Tomare explains that the three of them, because they were sucked into the ring rather than actually killed, they aren't totally dead. They each have a foot in the living world and in the dead world. So that's a thing going on. And then he throws out the name Volthoom. And this is like the second or third time he's done this. And Sinestro's like, okay, just explain who's Volthoom. Tell us what's up. And he's like, oh, Volthoom is responsible for all the dead here in the dead zone. Sinestro looks around and he's like, there's like 100 of you. He doesn't seem that bad. He's like, no. There are millions here. Volthoom was awful. And it turns out that way back when the Guardians unlocked the power of the emotional spectrum, Volthoom was there. He bathed in the light of first creation and became the first lantern. And when the Guardians said, hey, could you pretty please share, he lashed out at them and started torturing and killing millions of people across the universe. And the Guardians realized they couldn't kill him because he has the creation of the universe. If you kill him, the universe dies. So they just had to bottle him up because he also has the ability to warp and change reality when he's fully powered up. So that's the gist of it. He wants to torture the universe some more. And Simon's like, hey, this seems a little bit out of my weight class, being that I'm brand new and whatnot. Hal, do you want the ring back? I'll just give you the ring back. And Hal's like, no, I don't know if that's actually going to work since I'm dead or whatnot. We could both be stranded here, so let's just let this sit for now. And at that point, there is a blinding green light, and we hear the voice of Bidge outside, and he's like, oh, Simon, if you're in there, we're coming for you. And Simon starts being held up by the light, and he's like, oh, Hal, take my hand. And Hal goes to grab for it, but then Sinestro's like, nope, you are not getting out of here without me, Hal. And it turned... just short little mention that Simon is apparently subconsciously duplicating his ring, but it's trying to go after both Sinestro and Hal. It can't make up its mind. So there's just a fist fight between the two of them. And Sinestro's like, you may have the strength upper hand, but I have more will than you do. You're going to falter. And he brings up the memory of Carol, which is just enough to give a little bit of fear into Hal's heart. And he's like, cool, great, now the ring is mine. So he gets it, and we see that Sinestro pops out the other side of Black Hand's ring with Simon. However, in the process, Black Hand was actually sucked into his own ring. He's now in the dead zone, along with Hal. And Tomare's like, okay, so the fate of the universe is in Sinestro's hands. He's going to screw it up, and everything is going to die. So that's cool. And Hal's like, well, hold on. We have Black Hand now and his ring. Can't we use his ring to get out? And it's like, no, we can't because we're dead, and you can't because you still have a foot in the living side. And he's like, okay, well, what if I didn't? And we just see him staring at the edge of this cliff, theoretically about to kill himself in the dead zone. So, interesting issue. Sets up Volthoom a little bit more, gives more of his backstory. Art-wise, Kudranski does the lion's share of it. It is this beautiful, moody look. It really sets the idea of the dead zone. I loved Kudranski. I believe it was on the Penguin miniseries. Fantastic here as well. So, overall, I got to give this one a... I want to say 8, but I feel like that might be a bit too high. But I think the art elevates it to that point. Writing-wise, it is probably 7, 7.5. But I think that having this be this very, very grim yet beautiful-looking art boosts it up to that 8. So 8 for this. Tune in next time to whatever Volthoom's crazy shenanigans are. Detective Comics number 18, written by John Layman, art by Jason Fabok. This is finally continuing wholesale the Emperor Penguin stuff. No dips and dives into other things. So we open up with Tonight at the Gotham City Zoo, where Penguin is breaking into the Penguin enclosure, and he apparently has set up a stash of a whole bunch of umbrella guns. And the narration over top is Emperor Penguin saying, oh yeah, he's going to try to show up here. He's going to try to get his power back. We're going to show him how stupid of a choice that is. But we're not there yet. We cut to some time earlier where Batman is getting all of the inmates of Arkham back into Arkham after the events of Death of the Family. And he's finally done punching out a few of them, and he turns to the Penguin. He's like, you're next. And he's like, I am not one of these crazies. I was forced here against my will by Joker. I'm not going into Arkham Asylum. He's like, you're right. You're not. You're going into Blackgate Prison because you're just a normal evil guy. And he's like, oh, you think that, but I'm innocent. And then he lists off this whole thing of like, oh, I'm a pillar of the Gotham community, and I've done all these wonderful things recently, and you can't prove that I did anything wrong at all. And Batman's like, oh, God, he's right. I can't do anything. And then he does this whole rambling thing of just like, oh, yes, I've donated to these hospitals and I've done all these things. Can you just imagine the sympathy that Gotham will have for me if this Batman comes in without any sort of proof or anything like that, and he just drags my name through the mud? And then he says like, oh, I have the best money that lawyers can buy. He's like, I don't care about lawyers. And he's like, well, maybe you don't, but the system does. So Penguin's basically allowed to just walk free. And as he's doing so, one of the Arkham guards steps up and be like, hey, just letting you know, Batman, everyone's accounted for. We're good. Except for one, Victor Zsasz. And if you're not familiar with Victor Zsasz, he's just a normal-ass serial killer, but he tally marks his victims onto his skin. So then we cut to the reminder that Damian is dead because Bruce is mourning over his grave. And Alfred's like, is there anything you need, Master Bruce? And he's like, no, I'm good. So we see him trying to find anything to take down Cobblepot while also dealing with the fact that Zsasz is out just killing a bunch of people. And Alfred reminds him like, hey, I think it was something that you said to Damian very recently or Damian said to you of you have to wait for the Penguin. You can't just jump in on that stuff. But then we see Penguin has arrived back at his mansion, his estate, and as he tries to enter, the guards are just like, yeah, we don't work for you. We work for Penguin. He's like, I am Penguin, you stupid idiots. Let me in. And they just like smack him to the side and say like, nah, Penguin's in there. You get lost. You're nobody. So Penguin makes his way over to a payphone. He calls up Ogilvy, who's now Emperor Penguin, and he's like, hey, what's going on? I left you in charge of my thing. You hired 2 new guys who have no idea who I am. Nobody's taking my calls. What in the hell's going on in there? And Ogilvy goes on this whole thing. He's just like, oh, yes, you're going to find that my name is on all of your estates and all your titles and whatnot. And all this stuff is wrapped up in legal jargon and whatnot. And Penguin's still not getting it. And he's like, do you know what the cuckoo bird does with other birds' nests? And he's like, oh, of course. They lay their eggs in other birds' nests. And then all of a sudden Penguin gets it. And he's like, oh, you two, I am coming to get you, you bastard. And Penguin just hands up and says like, oh, it's Emperor Penguin. So at that point, Penguin looks across the street to that children's center that was originally named the Martha Wayne Children's Center, but then Penguin took it and named it after his mom, and now it's named after Ogilvy's mom. And they have like all the formerlies listed on the side. I know it's supposed to be like an actual moment, but it's so stupid. So anyway, Batman's beating up some guys trying to figure out basically what he can do to stop either Penguin or Zsasz at this point. He's getting reports of cut-up bodies, and thinks he's finally able to find Zsasz, but it's just not panning out. So at that point, over the radio pops up a break-in at the zoo, which is what we saw at the beginning, but then shots fired at Iceberg Casino. And Batman puts his together, he's like, all right, well, I know where I gotta go. So he goes over to the casino, he busts in the top skylight. Penguin's just shooting a bunch of people, and he's like, no, I still own this casino until midnight tonight, and I'm going to ring it in with the new owner. I'm going to make sure it's a night he never forgets. And Batman takes him down, just being like, Penguin, you said that you were untouchable, but we have you on camera breaking into the zoo now. And Penguin's like, and? He's like, well, trespassing is a crime, Mr. Penguin. And he's like, are you serious? Trespassing? Yeah, okay, sorry, trespassing. He's like, oh, we also saw you pick up guns. He's like, yeah, okay, I own a few guns. What are you saying, Batman? He's like, do you know how they took down Al Capone? It was for tax evasion. We got you, man. We have evidence that you did these things. And he's like, who cares? I still have all my lawyers. And Batman's like, I don't think you do. I think they're all gone now. I think you're just a guy. And so the cops come and they arrest Penguin. And he's like, you can't do this. I'm Penguin. You can't do this to me. So he's being hauled off to jail. And then we get an epilogue of Emperor Penguin is about to have a meeting with Zsasz, who's showing up at his office. But first he has to deal with a meeting of Miss Volkova, who is a character that came from the comic Talon, where she's trying to hide from Talia al Ghul because she used to be a member of the League of Assassins. Emperor Penguin's saying, yes, we'll hide you, but in exchange, you need to get this thing for me. And she pulls out of her pocket Man-Bat serum. And so somehow Emperor Penguin's doing something with Man-Bat serum. Don't know what. Don't care what. At least it's interesting. I mean, this is what I wanted. Because this story kept on getting delayed with having to be tied into the whole death of the family stuff and whatever else. And technically this one is part of the Requiem thing going on, but like, it's not really. They just kind of offhandedly mention like, oh yeah, and Damien died and I'm very sad. But I've been waiting for this story to continue for months now, and I'm very happy we're getting to it. So overall, art style looks great. Jason Fabok's fantastic. I think this is the natural progression. We needed to have this issue where Penguin came back and realized he lost it all. And I think they did a fantastic job of not only having Ogilvy take it away from him, but Batman also being complicit of putting Penguin away now. So there was no way that he could even try to bounce back, that he could even try to steal it back from Ogilvy. So I'm going to give this one I'm going to say 7.5. It's good. It's just, it doesn't have that extra little oomph to get it over the 8 mark, but it is still a very solid story being told. It's playing a longer game, and I'm very much appreciating that. So I look forward to seeing how it goes from here. Batwing number 18, written by Fabian Nicieza, art by Fabrizio Florentino. These are difficult names. So last issue left off with Batwing in his civilian gear possibly being shot, and then Matu having Sky Pirate about to bomb the hell out of his house. And we pick up with that second one where Matu's trying to call Batwing over his comms, and he's like, all right, if he's not going to answer, I'm just going to take care of this. And he sets up a whole setting of like locking down the base, rooftops failsafe activating, and then we see Sky Pirate give the order to just completely annihilate this base, but not before we see a few little escape pods flying their way out. So then we cut over to, well, we see Sky Pirate like overtop the base, and he's like, yep, all right, that's good. And they fly away in their ship. And then we cut over to the rich guy, Mr. Marksbury, who called for the hit in the first place. He's like, yeah, you blew it up, right? And he's like, yep, nope, here's all the video and stuff like that. It's totally gone. The building was empty except for the guy that we pinned as being Batwing. He was in there. So, yeah, he's dead. Give me my money. And he's like, all right, cool. Payment's in your account. What are you doing next, buddy? And he's like, oh, I'm going to go steal stuff off one of your ships. And he's like, you do know you just said that to me, right? And he's like, yep, bye. So at that point, we cut over to the courthouse where David was seemingly shot dead, but it turns out that Dawn, who was the one who shot him, actually just shot him in the leg so that he wouldn't be able to give chase as she let Marksbury's kid get out of there. And so he just screams like, no, I can't believe this has happened. So David's loaded up into the ambulance, and he tries calling Matu. There's no answer, and he's like, okay, I'm not getting any answer from Matu here. And also, I hear a bunch of fire trucks in the general area of our home base. So I'm a little bit concerned, all things considered. So we cut to the hospital. David's already on crutches with his leg bandaged up. And then all of a sudden, Matu is brought in, and he has severe injuries. He has burns all over his body. David sees this, and he's like, oh, God, what happened? What's going on? And he makes his way over to Matu's bed after he's been treated a little bit. And doctor says if he can make it through the night, he'll probably be fine. And as he's trying to talk to Matu, Matu very weakly reaches out and tells him, go back to the children's harbor, the place where you were raised, and just go there. So David's like, okay, yeah, whatever you need. I'm out. I'm on my way. So first he makes a pit stop over to their base of operations. And he's like, okay, so this place is gone. Like, there is nothing left. The little security things he activated basically wiped all the computers clean so that nobody could do anything with it, and everything's destroyed. So I could call up Batman and use the Batman Inc. money to, like, get some more, but would he, like, even be willing to give it to me? Because I'm kind of on the side of maybe I should have killed people right now. We see that Sky Pirate's still keeping a watch on the area. They get a facial recognition on David, and they're like, boss, I think we might have killed the wrong guy. And Sky Pirate's like, I got paid and I do not care, so whatever. So they just don't even care that Batwing's still alive. We see Marksbury is meeting with Dawn, and it's like, oh, you got my son out of jail? No one knows where he is except for me and you, right? And she's like, yep, absolutely. He's like, all right, here's your money and a little extra something. And then he tries to shoot her because, of course, she knows where the son is and got to tie up those loose ends. But she gets the upper hand on him and then jumps off a cliff into some jungle below. So she's still probably alive. David makes his way back to the police headquarters, and as soon as he walks in, some cops are giving him a hard time of like, hey, because of you, our fellow officers are dead. And he just uses his crutches to beat the crap out of them, and he's like, I don't want to hear it. Not today. Never again. And as he's about to be chewed out by his boss, he's like, I don't want, whatever you're about to say, they're the ones who started it. And basically the boss says, like, look, you are more of a hassle than you're worth right now. I'm letting you go. You're suspended until we can get to the bottom of the death of those cops in there. So just get out of here. And he's just like, hey, I don't know what you think happened in there, but like, this isn't my fault. And I don't know how you could think it was. And it's revealed that turns out that Dawn framed David by using his own gun to shoot those cops. So, oopsie. So anyway, he makes his way back to the children's harbor. He has some flashbacks to like early love and how he was raised, hearing Matu and stuff like that. And finally, as he makes his way throughout, he sees that one of the escape pods that made it out was crash landed here. And inside is some Batwing armor with a little note on it saying, bring this bomb to your next gunfight. So he puts it all on, and he's basically narrating, saying like, you know what? I tried to be the bigger man this whole time. This whole book, I've been the bigger man, not doing the killing stuff. Screw it. I'm going in. So, yeah, Batwing's going to kill people. I mean, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by, because it's the African Batman, which is, you know, its own thing. But I like the idea of this character is not exactly high tier, so no one's going to care if he breaks the no-kill rule. And when I say no one's going to care, I don't mean in terms of like, oh, it's a completely stupid plot. It's not. I'm saying it more in terms of the comic diehards and the execs aren't going to care. It's not going to ruin the marketability. I'm intrigued to see it, is the long and short of what I'm saying. I really want to see exactly how all this plays out. So yeah, no, it's a fun little book. It doesn't take itself too seriously. I mean, don't get me wrong, this issue was heavy as hell, but it's still doing, like, the fact that it had a little moment in there where Sky Pirate was like, I got my money and I couldn't care less. Peace. So yeah, overall, I got to give this one it's a 7. It's fine. It's like a nice solid book. It's a read that I'm never dreading each week, but it's still not doing anything that's boosting it to the top of the pack either. So 7. Earth 2, number 10, written by James Robinson, art by Nicola Scott. Last issue we left off with Jay Garrick, his mom, and Khalid being dragged into some sort of magic world by a guy named Wotan. This issue picks up very briefly with a prologue 2 years ago in Egypt, where Hawkgirl and Khalid are making their way through an old Egyptian pyramid or something before they get their powers. 59 minutes later, Hawkgirl has wings and Khalid's about to put on the helmet. So I guess that happened. Then we get to a long sequence of tell, don't show, where Wotan basically is just telling the group, here's what's going to happen. And he lays out, he's just like, yes, all right, so I brought you all here. You're now in my world because I need Khalid to go into that tower over there called the Tower of Fate. Or it's actually called the Tower of God at this point, but later on they call it the Tower of Fate. And he explains Naboo. He's like, oh, Naboo, he made the helmet, wielded chaos, and from it he bring order, and so they cast Naboo's power away when he died, and blah, blah, blah. The whole gist of this comic, and it's very simple, is that Wotan brought them all into this world. He cannot get into the Tower of God himself. He needs Khalid to go in and do it because Khalid sent the Helmet of Fate into this tower when he got sick of going crazy and having a voice in his head. However, Khalid is still inherently magical even when he's not wearing the helmet, and that's what's going to let him get in, and that's why he still has a little bit of magic powers. In addition, Flash got his powers from the god Mercury, and therefore he also has a little bit of magic about him, and for whatever reason, that also will be allowed into the Tower of Fate. And so in order to convince them to do this thing for Wotan, to go in, get the helmet, bring it out for him, and other people he works with, I guess, they're going to hold Jay Garrick's mom hostage. And she is, of course, not up for this, and Jay is, of course, not up for this, so Jay goes and attacks Wotan, and he just immediately flips on a spell that just picks him up and throws him away. And he's like, I am not negotiating here. You're going to do this. So let's get that straight. And Khalid explains like, oh, yes, I thought I was going to lose my mind, blah, blah, blah. You know the gist. And then Wotan's like, okay, the Tower of God is called that because it's like kind of like the Tower of Babel or like the Mighty Stone or whatever. They give it like a 50 names. I cannot express to you how long some of these monologues are because this is just expositing. We need to get through all of what Dr. Fate is on these pages. But regardless, they say, we're not going to do it. And Wotan just uses a teleportation spell and puts the pair of them into the tower. So they're inside, and then he makes the comment of like, ah, yes, this used to be the Tower of God, but because Naboo's presence is so strong here, it is now the Tower of Fate. And the entire tower is just like MC Escher on crack. Like everything's just flipped around and stairs lead to nowhere and blah, blah, blah. So then we cut away, and we cut to China, where Alan Scott is meeting up with his fiance's dad at his gravesite. And the fiance Sam, I forgot about that. So Sam's gravesite. And the dad is basically saying like, hey, look, it's cool that you weren't here. He's apologizing for that. He's like, it's cool that you weren't here. We all grieve in our different ways. I never approved of you guys. Like, I didn't like that he was gay, but I would have preferred that he was alive and gay than dead and unhappy. Like, you were always good for him, and that's something that matters. So I'll accept you in his death at least. And it keeps intercutting with Green Lantern going around nearby, basically just beating the crap out of a bunch of gangsters or stuff like that. And he's just saying, tell me why, why'd you do it? And we see that Alan blames himself for Sam's death, thinking that he was the target because he was such a high-profile guy. But Sam's dad's like, actually, no, you weren't the target. I've done a lot of private investigating on my son's death. I'm pretty sure he was the target of that train crash. So that's what Green Lantern's investigating from all these gangsters of like, why did you kill Sam? What's going on? And the gangsters have no idea. They don't know what's happening. So then we cut to sometime later, Louisiana. Hawkgirl's taking out some parademons that I guess were just still around. And then Green Lantern shows up and he's like, hey, you remember how I said I didn't need your help? I kind of need your help. And then last little page here, Jay and Khalid are making their way through the Tower of Fate and basically just making small talk, being like, oh, okay, well, are you able to like sense where the helmet is? And it's like, nah, this place is too magical. I can't figure out heads from tails in here. And he's like, oh, don't worry, we'll save your mom. We'll do all we need to do. But then they come across this giant monster that looks like Super Satan, and it's called the Great Beast. And I guess it's just being held here and is guarding the helmet. Okay, so while I like the concept of, okay, we need to describe how fate works and do that, only maybe twice during this entire comic do they ever cut away to a part where they show how fate is doing these things. In other panels across this 20-page comic, every time they're talking about it, they're just talking about it. It's just the guy standing there talking about Naboo and talking about fate. It's not good storytelling from a visual medium, you know? I want to see what's going on. I want to be able to, visually be stimulated here instead of this weird-looking vampire dude just throwing people around for 2 pages and then otherwise standing there looking very menacingly. So, yeah, it's a lot of tell don't show. It's an uninteresting issue because of it. I can't say I was particular. The only thing that's, I think, stand out here is that Sam may have had this extra secret life. And if they want to roll with that, so be it. But I'm more interested in the fate stuff, but they're making it as boring as it can possibly be. I hope there's going to be a cool fight with the Great Beast next issue, but who knows? Maybe they'll just sit there and have the Great Beast talk at them for a while about why the helmet's so dangerous. All in all, I can't say this issue is great from a writing perspective. Art-wise, it's fine. It's good. It's not bad in any way, but writing-wise, there needed to be some better visuals going on with it. So I gotta give this one I gotta give it like a 6. It's just, it's got some major, you know what? I'm bringing it down. I'm bringing it down to a 5.5. It's got major issues that I hope this is just a one and done where we just needed to do an exposition dump and we'll never do it again. Green Arrow number 18, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Andrea Sorrentino. So last issue left off with Oliver meeting his match of an archer named Komodo, and then he's saved at the last minute by a man named Magus, who says, you were never supposed to leave the island. So we pick up in Black Mesa, Arizona. Oliver is passed out from the heat. He's getting flashbacks to his dad teaching him some basic archery stuff of like how to pull back the bow and whatnot. And he gets up and continues marching his way towards the eponymous Black Mesa. It's just a giant mountain. It's a literal mesa. So, cut back to 3 weeks earlier. Oliver's waking up. There's a note left by Magus saying, hey, get out of Seattle, go to the Black Mesa, but first go to Emerson's office and look behind his bookshelf. And Oliver's like, okay. So he's walking down the streets. He sees newspapers are just all about the whole Oliver Queen wanted for murder sort of stuff. And so he makes his way to a payphone and he calls up Steve Trevor. And Steve Trevor, who of course is leading the Justice League of America right now, with Oliver as a kind of member, he's like, hey, Oliver, what in the hell are you doing, man? And he's like, I didn't kill him. But I got to deal with this on my own, okay? But, like, if this goes south, I might need JLA help. So can I just count on you for that? And he's like, look, I will keep the cops off your tail. I will make sure FBI does not find you for like maybe a few hours. That's the most I can give you. 48 hours is all I can give you. But yeah, JLA is going to be like on a hair trigger to come in there and clean all this up if you're not able to. So then we cut to a building somewhere in Seattle, and we see Komodo's walking in, and he's greeted by like a butler guy. Turns out that this guy runs a company called Stellmore, which is buying out Queen Industries now. It basically owns it. And this guy's name is LaCroix. And he's having a meeting with like the board of investors or whatnot. And they're basically saying like, because of everything that happened to Queen Industries with their CEO being dead, are we good to go? And LaCroix's like, yeah, no, we're fine. Like it's the companies all we care about, not the people running it. So at that point, they bring up like, what about Q-Core? Like that subsidiary that Oliver Queen ran as like a passion project. And LaCroix's like, screw it. It's gone. Who cares about it? So he shuts off the call, and we're introduced to his daughter, Emiko. And he's just like, oh, did you kill him, Daddy? And he's like, oh, nope, not yet. But don't worry, I'm going to kill him soon enough. And we see Oliver makes his way to a Chinese restaurant, and he's asking for a man named Henry Fifth, who apparently is living upstairs. And as he gets up there, we see this man curled up on the couch. He's just, living like a slob. And turns out this is Henry. He was a brilliant mind that worked at Queen Industries, but he had to be fired by Oliver personally because he was stalking Naomi. And so he's like, hey, look, I don't have any other connections. And I think that you were a brilliant mind. That's why I fired you personally, because I hated to see you go. But, like, we had to let you go because you were stalking Naomi. And he's like, oh, yeah, how is Naomi, by the way? And he's like, probably dead. But I need your help. Do you think I killed Emerson? And he's like, no, I don't. If you look at the video footage that they're blasting all over the news, it looks doctored. And Oliver's like, great, cool. I'm Green Arrow. I need you to help me solve this out. So we cut back to Emiko and LaCroix, and they make their way into the room where Naomi and Jax are actually being held hostage. They didn't die in the explosion of the building. And LaCroix comes in saying, like, all right, I'm hoping you guys are going to be cooperative today. I need you to tell me what you know. Like, you got to work for me 100%. And he undoes the tape on Jax's mouth, and Jax is like, same thing I told you yesterday, I'll never work for you. And he's like, all right, fine, cool. Pulls back his arrow, kills Jax. Dead. Like, there is absolutely no way he survived it this time. We see his dead body. And he turns his bow and arrow over to LaCroix, or over to Emiko. Over to Naomi. Emiko is there by LaCroix's side. That's what I meant. And he's about to shoot her, and she's like, okay, no, I'll do it. I'll help you find Green Arrow, because he knows that they are one and the same. And so we see Oliver and Henry taking stock of all of his arrows that he has left, which is basically like 10 to 15 arrows left. A lot of them are just useless, or not useless, but just normal arrows. Meanwhile, he's got a few little specialty arrows left. And Henry's like, yeah, no, I could start making you more arrows, but I need like time and money. And he's like, well, that's not anything that we have. So I need to get to Emerson's office. You need to help me get in past security. And we see they drive out in a delivery car for the Chinese restaurant. And when they arrive at Q-Core, Henry loops on all the surveillance footage, making sure that Oliver's never going to be seen. He makes his way into Emerson's office and gets into a secret room behind a bookshelf. And inside is this room full of like ancient weaponry and maps and pictures and stuff like that. And as Oliver's looking at the pictures, he sees one of Emerson and his father on the island that he spent all that time on. And in the picture is a third person that he doesn't recognize. And he's like, who the hell's this guy? It's LaCroix. It's very obviously LaCroix. So at that point, we cut back to LaCroix. Emiko comes in and interrupts his training and says like, hey, that Naomi woman says that she found the Green Arrow. He's actually at Queen Industries right now. And he's like, cool, awesome, let's go finish this. So Henry calls up to Oliver saying that someone just magically appeared in the room. He has no idea how he got in there. Oliver looks around and sees that it's Magus, and Magus is like, hey, you seen the room, cool, great, get out of Seattle. And he's like, I'm not going to do that. You're going to tell me what's going on. And Magus is like, you absolutely are not ready to deal with any of this stuff yet. Do you even know what your father did? And he's like, oh, it looks like he was some kind of treasure hunter or something. He's like, it's not about treasure. It's not the weapons. This is a war. He was a soldier in a war going on. Do you even know what the outsiders are? And he's like, no, should I? And Magus is like, oh my God, dude, you have to leave Seattle. And Green Arrow declines. He's like, I'm not going to leave. I'm not going anywhere. And Magus just tells him, like, all right, if that's the case, you got to know, I can't protect you anymore. I've kept you safe up to this point, but I cannot keep it going from this point on. You're on your own. And he's like, all right, well, fine, whatever. But Magus does give him the hint that, like, Komodo tipped off the cops and they're on their way here now. And he's like, I've got Colonel Steve Trevor keeping the cops off my case. He's pretty high up the ladder. And Magus is like, well, I'm guessing that he's got people even higher up the ladder as this police helicopter just shows up right in front of the window. So Henry's freaking out, tells Oliver to bail. Oliver shoots one of his grappling hook arrows to a nearby building. He starts making his way over across the rope when all of a sudden LaCroix shoots out the rope and he just starts plummeting to his death because he was like 30 stories up. And that's where we leave off, of him plummeting. It's good. I love the art style. I love the writing. It's setting up this huge mystery that I'm sure not everything's going to be resolved just by the end of this arc. It's going to be setting up a much larger run. I trust Lemire's writing. I love Sorrentino's art. There's nothing in this book I dislike. The only problem I particularly have with this issue is that I don't understand why we had to do the thing of Jax and Naomi died last issue, and then we actually killed them this issue. Or at least we killed Jax. It struck me as more of a... We just needed that extra little oomph this issue to show that LaCroix is a super bad villain guy. But it kind of weakens the last issue's thing. I kind of wish they would have died in the explosion. I think that that's just a solid way of being like, yeah, no, they're gone. That run is over and we're starting fresh. So having this little minor carryover, not the biggest fan, but it's still a fantastic issue otherwise. I'm going to give this one an 8.5. That may seem high for like a second issue where like not a lot of forward momentum's happening, but it is setting up so much and I am so excited for it. So yeah. World's Finest number 10, written by Paul Levitz, art by Kevin Maguire. Last issue we left off with the appearance that some mercenaries are trying to steal back all of the technology that Power Girl stole from Michael Holt, aka Mr. Terrific. And this issue picks up some indeterminate time later where apparently Power Girl's just going around and destroying all of the Holt labs that she can think of. So apparently there was in industries in Micronesia that was hit by a freak lightning storm, and Huntress is hearing this over the news and she's like, how are you? Lightning's not one of your powers. How are you doing that? And we see Power Girl just flying over, just being like, yep, I did it. I won't explain how, but I did it. And I'm making all of these things look like accidents. So the next one I'm going to do is an earthquake. And so she makes her way to a Silicon Valley place and she goes down underneath the earth, pushes the fault line a little bit, and that causes massive earthquakes up in the Holt Industries place. And it's like, yeah, okay, not quite enough though. So then she busts up into the building and just starts destroying it with her super breath. And as she's leaving, she sees that that little minor earthquake she caused kind of caused some massive fissures that a bunch of cars are falling down into. So she has to go and clean all that up because it is technically her fault entirely. And then she sees that once, even more so, a truck is about to fall off of a suspension bridge because of her. So she saves it as well and just be like, yeah, I think FEMA will cover that, considering it's definitely just a natural disaster. So sometime later, she's just back to relaxing. She's on a video call or some sort of call with Helena, who is making her way into another Holt Industries building, seemingly the main head office, and she's going in there to basically get some more information as to what happened to Holt even, because he seemingly just disappeared one day without a trace. And we know as the readers he went to Earth 2, but they had no idea about that. So she makes her way into his personal office, and as she's about to mess around with the computer, a bunch of T-spheres come out, and so she has to duck and cover for that. They don't really care as long as she leaves the computer alone. They're just there to secure that. So she comes out from beneath the desk, uses her crossbow, and uses a net to take out all the T-spheres. And she's like, all right, well, that's probably the only security thing, so whatever. So she's about to start hacking in, when all of a sudden, we all remember that Damien died. And so she gets a call from Karen saying, hey, your brother from another universe didn't quite make our meetup rendezvous date. So, hard cut to Gotham. She and Power Girl are in front of Damien's grave, and she's like, why do I lose everyone I open up to? And so Power Girl like flies away, just being like, I'll let you be alone with them for a while. And she's crying in the rain when she hears someone approaching the grounds nearby, and she's like, crap, I cannot deal with meeting Batman right now. I can't stand meeting my sort of kind of dad. I gotta get out of here. And so she ducks and covers and hides. She whistles for Power Girl to come back and grab her, and as Batman is approaching the gravesite, she takes off, and it seems like not even able to get a glimpse of her, but who knows. So then we cut back to the main office where Huntress was breaking into. They recognize that there was a burglary, but nothing is missing, and they can't figure out what big deal is going on. This is just your general security. So this is the cops who are coming in. So then all of a sudden, I forget her name, Alika, that's who it is. She's from the Mr. Terrific run. Alika steps in being like, oh, thank you, officers, for taking care of these T-spheres and investigating the burglary, but our own internal team will handle this from now on. And they're like, sorry, I misspoke before. This is actually Michael's personal address. This is his home, not his head office. So he's like, ma'am, this isn't part of the business. This is a personal address. Therefore, you don't really have any jurisdiction here. And in order to stand down, as you claim we want us to, we need to talk to Michael himself, who isn't around. When all of a sudden, Michael Holt walks out from around the corner saying like, oh, Alika speaks for me. We're all good. You guys can go on your way. I'll handle this very personally, as he gets a very grim look in his eye. And then we just follow up with a one-page epilogue of Karen and Helena flying through the sky. And Helena's like, hey, Karen, how did you have an affair with Michael Holt and not realize that he was Mr. Terrific? And she's like, oh, I mean, he was plenty good, but I wouldn't say terrific. Ah, ha, ha, ha. And that's the issue. I know that like the Requiem little mini crossover event thing where everyone that's ever met Damien just kind of deals with the fact that he dies, but like this felt so tacked on. It felt so much of just an interruption where I feel like that Paul Levitz was writing his script in order. Like he didn't have a general idea as to where the plot wanted to go. He was literally writing page by page. And then he got to this page of Helena about to break into the computer and got word down from on high of, hey, Damien died. And he's like, well, now I have to change everything. And rather than go back and edit his first 10 pages, he just kept going from there. It felt so non-worked in and so sudden. I don't know. It just left a bad taste in my mouth, is I guess what I'm saying here. It didn't feel earned of like, oh, we built up this whole thing and now he's dead. Which I guess speaks to the suddenness that it happened with, but screw you. I wanted it more. So overall, I got to give this one I gotta give it like a 6, because while it doesn't do anything that's like horrible, it also feels like it's missing just so much. In fact, I'm going down to a 5.5 on this. anytime I dip beneath 6, I almost feel bad because I'm like, well, is it really deserving of that? But no, it is. It's this issue didn't do anything. This issue, the only thing it's set up is that Michael Holt may still be alive, and we know for a fact that he isn't, I think. So, yeah, it's just kind of a nothing issue. And if I paid $3.99 for this when it came out, I'd be a little bit pissed. So, yeah, it's a 5.5. Stormwatch number 18, written by Peter Milligan, art by Will Conrad. Last issue we left off with Midnighter and Apollo going down to Earth, meeting up with Zealot, and then OMAC's here. So this issue picks up with Engineer reactivating OMAC and saying, hey, I'm going to control you now. And he's like, get out of my head. And he's like, no. So sends him through a portal. And then we cut back over to Midnighter and Apollo. Midnighter is gushing over Zealot's hover motorbike and saying how she got it from some sort of mass murderer from, space. And Apollo's just like, okay, I think you're kind of flirting with Zealot here. I'm picking up some strong vibes. What's going on here? Because, you really seem into this extremely hot chick. And he even calls out, she says, oh, can you just wash your hands before you touch my bike? And Midnighter's like, that's not the only thing he wants to touch. Apollo's like, that's not the only thing Midnighter wants to touch. So at that point, they notice that something is coming. They notice that the formation of birds is weird. And then all of a sudden, OMAC comes out from a portal and starts attacking them. And Apollo immediately tries to be like, Midnighter, get behind me, Will. But before they can even make a battle plan, Zealot's charging in with Midnighter, doing some cool combo moves. And Engineer is speaking through OMAC saying like, hey, I just want to negotiate. And Apollo blasts OMAC saying, negotiate this. And OMAC, the poor guy, he's like, the entire time he's conscious. He's unable to do anything about it. But he's like, it's not my voice. You're hurting me. Please stop. So, portal opens up and OMAC blasts the three of them through it. They end up in hyperspace, and this, as they're hurtling through hyperspace, this is the point where Apollo's like, hey, Midnighter, just want to clarify, are you gay? Just straight up asks it. And he's like, seriously? You want to do this right now? And just like, oh, no, it makes sense. Our story in Young Romance number 1 is kind of canon, and you didn't really take to my advances there, so it's all kind of making sense. So at that point, they're just hurtling through the bleed, and Engineer comes up in a giant hologram, just be like, all right, hey guys, here's the deal. Either A, you all die out here in the bleed in hyperspace and no one will ever find you, or B, you let me do just some itty-bitty little mental tweaks to you to make it so that you will live your totally normal lives, but if you ever act against me, you'll die. I think that's fair. And apparently she already did the mental surgery on Harry, and Harry's like, guys, I'm so happy. And his head's all shaved and he's got this weird circuitry coming out. And he's like, you guys should do it. Just take a look at Jenny Quantum. She's happy. And Jenny's still just laying there on the floor having a seizure. And so at that point, Midnighter's like, well, I'd rather be a corpse rather than give in to her. And Apollo wants to continue the conversation, but it's like, nah, we're going to continue this later. So they use Zealot's bike to crash into the Eye of the Storm, the headquarters of Stormwatch. OMAC shows back up, starts throwing some punches, and Apollo's just like, all right, I'm done with you. Punches him in the face, and just he starts drifting off in deep space. Engineer gets shocked by something. I'm not even sure what. It just says, oh, I can sense you're resisting me, OMAC. I am your will. And then she gets shocked. I don't know what happens there. But regardless, Zealot starts attacking the base. Apollo calls out, is like, oh, your girlfriend's doing a pretty good job there, huh, Midnighter? And Midnighter's like, she's not my girlfriend. Shut up. So then we see that Harry, he is sneaking up behind Engineer, and he's like, aha, you fool, I was only acting like I was happy. Now I will murder you. And he goes to cut her, but it turns out, no, she did actually do brain surgery on him, and he can't kill her. So it's like, all right, well, second option. And he turns to Jenny Quantum, and he slices his sword as precisely enough to cut open atoms in the air and causes a few stray electrons to, like, re-spark her brain properly so that she comes out of her seizure. And so she comes out, immediately screams, causing a massive explosion that throws everybody apart. And Omax just left being like, I'm free, and then disappears. And then they all crash down back to Earth. At least the Eye of the Storm does. Midnighter and Apollo are the only ones who get up, and they're like, geez, what was that? And they put together that it was Jenny, who just freaked out for whatever reason. And they see Engineer's body completely in disarray, and it's just like, oh, geez, okay. I think this is the end of Stormwatch. And Zealot shows up being like, oh, that's cool. Hey, Midnighter, if you're no longer on that team, why don't you come with me? We'll go visit the stars. And we see Apollo looking at Midnighter longingly, but cut to Zealot's flying away, and Apollo's like, why didn't you go with her? And he basically says, like, oh, I like her, but she's an excellent warrior, but it doesn't mean I want to climb on her bike, if you know what I mean. And Apollo says, like, hey, it's okay if you're straight. I'm not judging you. And then Midnighter just lands a big old kiss on him and says, like, all right, does that answer your question? And they say, oh, well, this is only the beginning, as we see Engineer's body start to slightly repair itself. So I couldn't help myself. I kind of looked ahead in the solicits of, like, what in the world's coming up next. I think this team of Stormwatch is, like, done. I think that we're following Midnighter Apollo as they do other things, but, like, I didn't see any Engineer. I didn't see any Jenny Quantum. I think they're gone. So the end of an era, I guess. As for this particular issue, it was fine. It was, I dare say, good. Art-wise, looked great. Well, Conrad was fine throughout. It did feel kind of rushed. Like, the fact that it's just, Omac was just like, all right, I'm a part of this. Okay, I'm gone. Like, I don't know. It seemed like that should have been built up a bit more, but, and the same thing with Zealot as well. She was like, hey, I'm here to help you guys out. All right, peace. Like, I get that once we hit the end of the arc, there's nothing more for them to do, so it makes sense that they're just gone. But, I don't know, it did just feel really, really fast-paced compared to pretty much the rest of this arc has been a lot slower. And I say arc, I mean from the time that Harry showed up as a, what's it called, Shadow Lord. That's where I consider, like, this arc to start. But all in all, I did enjoy it. I'm going to go ahead and give it just a flat 7. I think it's fine. I think it's good, but it's not stand out in any particular way, though it does at least keep me intrigued as to what will happen to the future of Stormwatch. Animal Man number 18, written by Geoff Lemire, art by Steve Pugh. Last issue was the end of the Rot World series in Swamp Thing number 17. And it left off with Buddy and Alec basically being told by the Lords of the Rot, hey, we don't like Anton anymore. Go back and follow him through time and stop him, and we will send you guys back as well. And they're like, okay. So we see Buddy jumps into the portal, and he goes through, the time portal. He sees everybody in the Rot because, the world was taken over. And he's like, this is too crazy for me, too messed up. I'm just going to keep on plowing through because I just need to focus on getting back to my family, getting back to the moment to save them. And he arrives back to now in the DC universe, and he pops out a portal and lands right next to the RV that his family was taking cross country. And when he lands, his arm breaks, and it's gruesome, like the bone is popping through the arm. And as he looks down, he sees this little rot creature, just this piece of, like, goo, basically, leap up and grab onto his face. And he's like, nope, not dealing with that. Picks it off, throws it down, and he pulls into the red, which is now far stronger because, the rot's not taken over yet. And he gets to Bloodhound in order to find his family. And he uses, like, speed of a cheetah and everything like that. And he recounts how when his son Cliff was a kid, there was this art book he found of how you could make animals out of just like handprints and stuff like that. And he would make an entire collage of all these animals. And every time that Buddy thinks about these animals to call on them in the red, the visual is Cliff's artwork. He always has that in his head. So he makes his way through the woods over the river, and he comes to the barn where Maxine is facing down the hunters who have her family hostage, and she's willing to give herself up in exchange for her family's safety. And she just made the agreement. Her mom, brother, and grandmother are all free. And they see Maxine is about to give herself up, and she's saying it's the only way. Her mom screams out. She's about to be bitten, but then, boom, Buddy busts in the door, and he's like, you guys are going down. And he's like, well, now hold on. Anton said he was going to take care of you, and then this world would be ours. Like, this isn't fair. And Maxine just uses her red powers to basically bitch slap one of the hunters, just saying, like, be quiet. So the hunters are knocked out. One of the hunters is knocked out. The other one goes and attacks Buddy, and they start going at each other. Meanwhile, William Arcane starts using his rot abilities to kill Ellen and causing her to die. And then Maxine just comes up again, uses her abilities and punches Arcane through a wall, saying, you've been a bad, bad boy. So Arcane's pissed off, and he's yelling at the hunters, and he's like, hey, I'm with my uncle, and he said he's going to give me all the C's, and you have to listen to me because I'm an Arcane. And the hunters are like, Arcane screwed up. We don't know how, but he screwed up. We're done here. And they just bitch slap Arcane aside. And Buddy's like, guys, he's kind of a dick, but he's still a kid. Like, you shouldn't be doing that to a kid. So he goes in and Buddy leaps and he starts attacking the hunters. Meanwhile, Socks talks to Maxine and basically says, like, hey, Maxine, your dad can't do it on his own. He needs your abilities. You got to get in there and do something. And Cliff picks up a board from the shed, which has been torn apart by this point. He comes in trying to use it to attack the hunters, not really doing much of anything, to the point where Buddy says, how about you back off? How about you just go over there? How about you stay away from the fight? And so Socks is still arguing that Maxine is the only one who can stop this. She has to be the one to take out the hunters. And Ellen's like, no, I'm not letting her be a part of this. She's just a little girl. And Socks is like, you don't understand. She is so much more than that. She is the all-mother. She is the giver of life. You have to let her be what she is. And so Maxine uses her powers to control life and basically slog off the rot to see the hunters and see what they were underneath. And so she uses her abilities and forces the rot off of them, gets them back to what they previously were. She fixes her dad's arm in the process. And underneath it all are two guys wearing these skin-tight, like, almost looking like diving suits. And they mention something about Project Taproot and the Ascension Chamber. And they have no idea, like, where they are or what happened in the in-between. And Buddy talks to Socks. He's like, I thought you said these guys were like previous animal men. Who are these? What's Taproot? What's Ascension Chamber? And Socks is like, I don't know. This is weird. I genuinely have no idea what's going on. So Buddy's celebrating with his family that everything's okay. And he starts apologizing to his wife. And Ellen's like, I can't. You keep on apologizing and saying this will never happen again, but it just keeps on happening again. Like, we can't keep doing this. And then we see William Arcane start to get up, and he's charging after Buddy from behind. He's about to use his powers on him, and Cliff comes in and elbows him in the face, taking a lethal blow to the chest while he's at it. So Cliff collapses. William's like, oh, you'll never escape. The death always wins, Buddy Baker. Death always wins. And he just snaps his own neck, it seems. So Cliff is dying in his mother and father's arms, and he's like, oh, Dad, I did it. I saved you. I was a hero just like you. And that's where it ends, is Cliff dies. It sucks. I mean, I was never too big on the character of Cliff to begin with. I feel like out of everyone in this book, barring maybe the grandmother, he was given the least amount of development, but he was still given development. And especially in this issue, you could tell it from the very beginning when he's talking about, like, oh, my son did all these paintings and whatnot. It's like, okay, yeah, someone's not making out of this, and it's pretty easy to see who. It's touching. It hurts. It's completely avoidable, but I guess that's kind of the point of it, is that this stuff is just going to happen, especially in a family where they are fighting against literal death gods. So, yeah, overall, I got to give this one... I feel like I want to say 8.5, but that feels a bit too high, because while it is still good, it is an epilogue. It is something where it's setting up the future of the book, while in itself is not that big on its own. So I am just going to lower this down to an 8 flat, but it is fantastic. And I think in terms of being the true finale to the rot world of Animal Man, it's crushing. It's a really heart-wrenching ending to it, but it is kind of the only way it could have ended. So yeah, I'm always interested in seeing what more this book has in store. Swamp Thing number 18, written by Scott Snyder, art by Yanick Paquette. So the end of Rot World happened. They went into a portal to chase after Anton Arcane through time. And apparently Swamp Thing ain't doing so hot in the Rot time portal, where the protectors of the Rot are like, we've never really tried to protect life in here. It's always been a thing we kind of got rid of. Is he going to be okay? And Swamp Thing's just like, you are a seed. You have life in you. Focus, focus. And finally, he does make it out the other side, as we see the moment where Abby is about to be killed by Anton. And he's about to rip out her spine, and she apologizes to Alec, but then, portal opens up, and Swamp Thing just impales Anton on his finger claws, and he does it numerous times. And Alec's like, I don't know how you did this, but the portal is open and you don't stand a chance. And Alex just tears him in half, and he looks to Abby being like, is it really you? Are you alive? And she's like, yeah, I think. And so they embrace, they share a hug. And he explains, I'm so sorry, I was trapped in a nightmare world. And it's like, whatever. I knew you were going to come back. So they hug, and they're like, okay, we do have to hurry, though, because, he's an avatar of the Rod. He's not going to stay dead even when you rip him in half. So we gotta take this thing down from the source. And Swamp Thing's just like, all right, how do we do that? And she's like, well, we kind of have to rewrite the rules. So they walk into the room that the big doors, the one that they were both dreaming about for so long. They finally make it in the room, and behind it is the Parliament of Decay. And they're like, Abby, we've already dealt with it. They can't stop him. They're unable to do anything because they gave too much power to their avatar. And so Abby's like, yeah, I'm going to become their avatar. You have to kill me. So then we see Anton from the present day is come across by Anton from the future, who traveled back in time. And he's like, what? Why'd I show up here? I was supposed to show up at a different time. This sucks. And the other Anton's like, hey, help me up and we can take out Swamp Thing together. And he's like, no, I'm just going to devour you and absorb your essence. So new Anton eats old Anton. And he then starts trying to break into the room where Abby and Swamp Thing are having a very serious debate of Swamp Thing doesn't want to kill his girlfriend. And she's like, it's the only way. If I die, I will become their new avatar, and I'll get the power and he'll lose it. And I'll be able to balance all of the rots, the red and the green again. And he says, if you do this, though, we can never be together. And she's like, I know, but you're never going to lose me. I'm always going to be a part of you. So they share one last hug, and she says, just take me there, Alec. Hold me and take me there again like you used to. Take me back to the swamp. And as she says swamp, he impales her with his growth again, which sounds weird now that I say it. But regardless, she dies. The Parliament of Decay reach out and start absorbing her to become the next avatar. Anton breaks through the door, and he's like, I will not let this stand. And Swamp Thing says, too late, it's already happened, man. You're losing your power bit by bit already. So he comes up and he stabs him through the chest. Swamp Thing stabs Anton and it's just like, oh, I'm going to make sure she gets all of your power. I'm going to make sure you don't get in the way. So at that point, they pretty much just get back and forth of stabbing each other. And it seems like Anton has the upper hand until Swamp Thing gets some extra strength. He uses his horns that he grew and impales Anton on those. And then Anton's like, fine, all right, you want me to deal with you first? I'll deal with you first. And so he just really starts tearing apart Alec. And Anton's like, all right, this is it. I'm going to kill you and you're going to go to your own personal hell. And he's like, yeah, all right, I'll see you there. And so Anton kills Swamp Thing. He stabs Alec enough that he is dead. And as he turns around to try to finally stop Abby, Abby's already finished her transformation. She's this like black-skinned winged angel with long white hair. And she's like, oh, it's too late. You're going to die now, Anton. And Anton's like, you can't do that. I'm the Avatar of the Rot. And she just blasts a hole in his stomach, being like, try to regenerate. See what happens. It's not going to work. Your power's gone. I've undone your influence on the people of this land. It's over. The portal's closed. And Anton's like, this isn't over. I am going to get back. And she's like, yeah, I'll show you. Whatever. So she casts him off to the Parliament of Decay, and they make sure he's going to suffer for all of eternity. And we get one last panel of Abigail cradling Alec's body, his human body. And then we cut to the Grove, where it's, where the new Parliament of Trees is. And Swamp Thing comes back up there. And he's like, hey, I'm back. Why am I back? And they're like, you are an Avatar of the Green. You were always going to come here when you died. But, now you are 100% of the Green. You have no man left inside you. Alec Holland is dead. You are purely Swamp Thing now. And Swamp Thing's like, it's weird. I feel, the sun is my heartbeat now. It's strange. And I just want to lay down my roots and just stay here forever. And the Parliament's like, you can. You absolutely can. But our next Avatar isn't quite ready yet. We don't have her prepared. Would you mind staying our protector for just a little while longer before it all gets settled down? And he's like, I don't know about that. And we see that we see Abby coming up behind Alec, and the Parliament's letting down its rules just a little bit to let her come in, and they have one last goodbye, both 100% pure Rot and Green, and they share a touch. Immediately Swamp Thing starts catching on fire because of it, and it turns out that Abby brought their human bodies here. Both their human bodies are going to lay here as their final resting place, and Swamp Thing causes a grove of flowers to grow over top of them, and just like, oh yep, this will be their final resting place, and it's time to let them rest. And so they share a kiss. They go their separate ways, and the Parliament's like, so are you going to stay our Swamp Thing for a while? And he's like, me being Swamp Thing has taken everything from me. It's caused me to die and see horrific things and lose everything I've ever had over and over and over again. And the Parliament's like, fair enough, we get what you're saying. And he's like, no. I've lost everything over and over again, but I've also come back over and over again. It's been a cycle of rebirth. And you know what? Maybe I should give it this one last shot of being just pure Swamp Thing now. So he says he's ready to stand here before them for whatever comes next. And that's the end of Scott Snyder's Swamp Thing. Next issue, Charles Soule picks up the run. I think it was great. I think it does a fantastic job. It squares the circle of, is Swamp Thing Alec Holland or is he his own thing? Turns out a little bit of both. We have a new Avatar of the Rot. It set up an entire event in terms of Rot World along with Animal Man. It finished it up perfectly. It was a very emotional ending. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it the whole way through. I can't find any real fault in it. This issue really does hit a few high marks, and despite leaving in such a dour place of Abby and Alec both died, in the end, it still came out on a positive note, and I cannot think of higher praise than to say that they managed to pull that off perfectly. So overall, I'm going to give this one, it's kind of just it's the representative of the run as a whole, but I do think this issue did very well individually. I'm going to give this one a 9. I think it's really, really good. And I look forward to seeing what Charles Soule decides to do in the run and how he's going to pick up where Scott Snyder left off. Dial Age number 10, written by China Miéville, art by Alberto Ponticelli. Last issue left off with Nelson trying to find out information about the second dial. He turned into a hero called the Glimpse, which I just love. And the other person dials the second dial and becomes the Bristol Bloodhound. So this issue picks up with the Bloodhound. He's like, oh, I don't need to see you, Glimpse. I can smell you out. And the Centipede, I believe that was his name, the Centipede's there, and he's like, oh, I got a lock on him. I could see him because I'm looking through these lenses in my mask. So he sicks the Bristol Bloodhound on him. But before he's able to, Bristol Bloodhound just kind of freezes up. He's not attacking Nelson. And Nelson is on the comms with Roxy, and she's like, what's going on? And he's like, I don't know. I have no clue what's going on. He's just standing there. Like, keeps on asking himself, what should I do? And finally, as they're talking to each other, and Bristol Bloodhound's like, what should I do? He's just directly asking him. He's like, what? I don't know. Glimpse gets shot in the leg, and he's calling over the comms to Roxy saying, I'm hurt. You got to get me out of here. And he says, help me. And at that point, the Bristol Bloodhound's like, all right, you got it. He picks up the Glimpse and starts staring down all the soldiers nearby. And he's like, oh, you can try to take me out, but I got a missile on my back. One more step and I'll self-trigger. I'm the Bristol Bloodhound. And at that point, the Centipede's like, sir, I think we should stand down. He's going to destroy us all. So he stands down, and the Glimpse says, get us out of here. And the Bristol Bloodhound just takes off literally like a rocket out through the building and straight up into the sky. And so they're flying across town. Roxy is in Nelson's ear the whole time. And Nelson's kind of losing himself to the Glimpse here. He's like not remembering that he's Nelson. And Roxy's trying to be like, remember who you are. You have to remember you're Nelson. You're not Glimpse. You're just Nelson. And so at that point, he commands Bristol Bloodhound to take us somewhere so they can get fixed up. And they go to a meeting place that Nelson and Roxy had established beforehand. And when Roxy gets there, they see that Nelson's perfectly fine. He's tied up the soldier, and he's got both dials going on. And she runs up, she hugs him, just like, oh, I was so afraid I would never see you again. And I'm happy that you found this place. And just like, yep, no, we got everything figured out here. And they turn to the soldier, and the soldier's, again, just dead-eyed staring, asking what he should do. And Nelson explains, like, ever since they got back, he's done everything I told him to do, and he's just been sitting here. He hasn't fought back at all. And they had his dial, and they're saying, like, have you tried using his dial? And Nelson's like, no, I'm done dialing for tonight, and if something's wrong with his dial, we got to be extra careful. And Roxy's like, look, you've got my back. You have that dial. We have to figure out what the government wanted here. We have to use this dial. So she uses it. Nelson is like, no, don't do it. But it doesn't work. It just straight up doesn't work. It's just a broken dial. And the soldier has been muttering this whole time, and he ends up muttering dial 7433 for hero. And they're like, wait, 74, that's not the numbers. That doesn't spell hero. And Nelson looks at the dial, and he's like, I get it now. I understand. He's not dialing hero. We dial hero. He's dialing SIDE. He's literally a sidekick. And the whole reason that he's been asking for direction this whole time is that the sidekick has to listen to the hero. They didn't know that. They didn't understand why he wasn't doing these things properly. And it's because he needs to take orders, but specifically from someone with the hero side of the dial. He just kind of absentmindedly was taking orders from the military, but it's only once an actual hero showed up that he got out of it and realized he's the one he needs to be listening to. So then we go to the Centipede, and he's like, yep, all right, Roxy had a whole lot of stuff on dials, but she's more concerned with how the dials are currently. She doesn't care about their history or how they were made or where they came from. And apparently they have a lot of notes from, I think it's Edison. Edison's notes, but not like, I don't think Thomas Edison. But basically he was being informed as to how the dials work and stuff like that via someone who came through with the dials. And we see them being able to transform constantly, and they think that it is the dialer, like the one on the line, the shadow on the line, I think it's called. So he's trying to break down what happened there. And we see Centipede is holding a meeting with the priest of the Church of the Dial, the one that we met like 3 issues ago. And Centipede holds up a painting and says, like, what is this? What is going on here? And it's a painting of what seems to be like some demon sending someone out of something. And they say, like, oh, it's the exile of the operator. It's the exchange. And the Centipede says, here's the thing. That thing that visited you before, it was a false prophet. It is someone that the operator wanted taken care of. And we can work together to take out that false prophet. We can work for the real operator here. So right now, I need you to tell me what you know so that we can pool our knowledge and send a message to the emissaries of the dial. So we see Nelson and Roxy. They're dealing with the 2 dials now, and Roxy's trying to settle it out and be like, okay, maybe one of us can be the hero and the other could be the sidekick, and we'll just trade off time to time, but we still need to have like times where neither of us are the hero, so we'll have to figure that out. And Nelson just steps up being like, hey, I'll just be the sidekick. It's cool. Don't worry about it. And she's like, really? What? Why are you saying that? And he's like, you clearly have a better grasp on your identity and your reality. I think it's better if I'm the sidekick and you can command me to remember who I am. I'm hoping it works that way. And so basically he's just taking second banana here. He's like, yeah, no, you go for it. So they do their transformations. Roxy turns into her normal thing. I forget what the name of it was, but she puts on her mask. And Nelson turns into Copter. And basically she's just reminding him the whole time, like, remember, your name is Nelson. I command you to remember that. And he's like, yeah, my name's Nelson. That's how it is. And Nelson describes the feeling of being the sidekick is he's still able to do his own thing if he truly wanted to. He has free will, but listening to the orders of the hero fills him with this like warmth and this feeling of good that he just can't ignore. It's like a drug. It's the sort of thing where he's just so eager to listen to orders. And so they go out and basically just do some normal ass crime stopping stuff just to get the feel for it, just to get an idea as to what's going on before they go back into trying to figure out about the government coming after the dials. And as they take down a couple of criminals, they unmask and they're like, yeah, no, it's doing good. They're still in their hero form. And Roxy's form is saying to Nelson, like, hey, look, I command you to do whatever you want. Like, you are in charge of your thing. I command you to do that. And he just straight up makes out with her. He just goes in and kisses her, and that's apparently what he wanted to do. And that's where the issue ends. It's a twist. It's something. I'll give it that. I didn't see it coming that he was going to make out with her. So I really like the idea of the sidekick dial. I adore that. I didn't see that one coming. I knew there was something wrong with the dial, but the fact that it was sidekick, that's so clever. I love it. Overall, this was just a fun issue. It did a bit of explaining while setting up a few little twists coming ahead in the future. Now that Centipede's working with the church and Roxy and Nelson, they may, because Roxy has been hinting at having these feelings, and apparently Nelson's got him back. So, yeah, it's going to be a wild ride. I'll give this one I'll give it a solid 8. I really did enjoy this issue. I think it's a fantastic twist on something I thought I already knew everything about. So, yeah, good issue. The Phantom Stranger number 6, written by J.M. DeMatteis and Dan DiDio, art by Xander Cannon and Gene Ha. And this last issue had a whole thing of the dude who was a Terrence 13 was told by the Question to tell Phantom Stranger he knew where his family was. This issue picks up in Vegas, because apparently that's where Terrence 13 said it was supposed to be. So Phantom Stranger's in Vegas. He goes into a casino called Lucky Devil, and he just monologues for 2 straight pages of like, these humans, they're trying to ignore the fact that they're mortal via these vain desires, but I too have a family and I worry about them. What is wrong with me? And so then he's approached by an escort, and it's just like, oh yeah, would you like to lose that overcoat, mister? And he's like, you're offering me sex. And she's like, yeah, okay, you could put it like that too. And then all of a sudden her phone goes off, and she immediately gets this look on her face that I can't describe. It is the strangest panel I have ever seen drawn, of just sheer confusion and disgust. Just look up like page 3 of this book if you can. It's so strange. Anyway, turns out it's Terry 13 on her phone. And so Phantom Stranger commands this woman like, go do something productive with your life, and sends her away. And then 13 on the other end is like, hey, I'm kind of watching you. I'm seeing what you're doing on the security cameras. Anyway, I told you that your family is here. And as far as I know, that's true, but I'm not sure where. However, there is this one place in this casino that has absolutely no mystical energy, which is weird because everywhere has at least a little bit of mystical energy. So I would suggest searching there. And Phantom Stranger's like, all right, will do. Also, I hate you, Terry 13. So he goes into the high stakes poker room, and there's a guard at the door, and the guard's like, hey, you're not allowed in there. And Phantom Stranger just does the whole, yes, I am. Okay, go on in. And when he goes in, he's greeted by a omni-dimensional room where the 3 brothers, the sons of Trigon, are playing poker. And they're just like, hey, come on in. And he's like, kind of hard. You guys are floating in the middle of a void. And just like, oh, well, sorry. We thought maybe you'd be powerful enough to do that. He's like, oh, no, I can do that. And he makes himself a bridge to walk over to their poker table. And I can't remember all their names offhand. It's Suj, Ruskov, and I think Belial. So either way, they're all playing poker. And they're like, oh, hey, we just finished off with our last poker playing buddy, which is just at this point now a corpse in this chair that they toss over into the void. And they're like, how about you sit down and play with us? And it's just like, oh, well, you know, I do consider myself a friend and not an enemy at this point. So yes, I will play. And they're like, all right, well, what do you have to offer? And he says, oh, I have these pieces of silver around my neck. And they're like, yeah, no, we'll play for that. That's got a lot of mystical energy off of it. Totally good. Let's do it. So the dealer, who is quite literally Lady Luck, deals him in. And they're playing Hades Hold'em, which is just Texas Hold'em. I don't know why they felt the need to say otherwise, but it's Hades Hold'em. And at this point, Phantom Stranger, he's like poking around at everybody, and he's like, yes. He's playing off how one of them is saying how he's not afraid of anything, yet is clearly afraid of Phantom Stranger and his own brothers. And he's like, no, I'm not. Shut up. The other one is just busy playing on his phone. Ruskov is. And meanwhile, Belial's the only one who's just like, all right, God, can we just have a fun game? Can we just enjoy ourselves here? So the whole game is playing out here. We see that Ruskov is poked and prodded by Phantom Stranger, like he's in his mind, and he forces him to fold. And he's like, wait, no, hold on, I didn't want to fold. And the other brothers are like, oh, too late, you did. Ha 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 ha. So he storms out. He's a little bit angry. Then we get to Shug, who, once the next card comes out, he goes all in, and so do Belial and Phantom Stranger. Meanwhile, Phantom Stranger's like, well, you know, are you sure you want to be doing that? And he keeps on poking and prodding inside of his head, to the point where Shug is like, I know you're in there. I can feel you in my head. You're cheating. You're lying. And Belial's like, are you poking around inside my brother's heads? And he's like, I give you my word that I'm not. And Belial's like, well, he says he's not, so we got to trust him. That's the rules around here. You got to trust your guess. And Shug is so pissed off, he just takes his cards, holds them to his forehead, stabs a knife through him, and says, like, you want to see my cards? There you go. I'm out. And so he folds. And Belial's like, all right, look, we don't even need to see the last card. We don't need to see the river. I know that you're here for some other reason. You're poking around in our brains. You swore that you weren't doing that. We could have been friends. You said going into this that we were friends, not enemies. So what's going on? And he's like, I'm wondering about the location of my family. I feel that one of you guys took them because you literally, or you or one of your brothers showed up at my house and, like, threatened my family. And he's like, yeah, well, if we did it, we would have owned up to it. But we didn't. We didn't do it. And this could have been a fun poker game. But alas, you had to go and ruin it. Dealer flipped the card. And dealer flips the card. And it turns out that Belial would have won. Belial would have had a full house over Stranger's flush. So he sends him out and says, like, because you cheated in this card game, because you have turned an enemy from a friend, we are now eternal enemies, guaranteed forever. I know nothing of your family, but get the hell out of my casino. So as Stranger's walking out, turns out Deadman was inside him the whole time. And Deadman was actually the one who was poking and prodding inside of the other's brains, trying to figure out if they knew anything about the family. And Deadman admits, like, yeah, none of them know about your family, but Ruskov isn't an idiot that he pretends to be. Sug is exactly as hot-headed as he seems to be, but Belial is by far the last guy you want to be an enemy, and you just made an enemy for life out of him, so tough luck there. And Deadman hops into someone else's body, bails, and says, like, oh, and by the way, Phantom Stranger, you're the worst of all. I would have much rather stayed in those demons than stayed in you one more second. So the prostitute from the beginning comes back up and it's just like, hey, I was packing up my stuff about to begin a better life when my other cell phone rang, and it is once again for you. Please make this stop happening. And so he picks up the phone. He's like, Terry, stop calling me. And he's like, well, I would if you just got your own phone. Anyway, did you get your family back? And he's like, no, they didn't know anything about my family. This was a complete waste of my time. And he's like, okay, here's the thing, though. I know where they are. I know where your family are. I'm going to tell you where your family is. So just get on back here. And Phantom Stranger hangs up, and we see him once again. We see Terry once again talking to questions, saying like, well, I don't like lying to the Phantom Stranger, but you're saying I have to, so let's see what comes of it. So yeah. Overall, it feels like kind of just an issue where they had an idea, they wanted to play poker with some demons, and they just ran with it. It didn't really end up in doing anything. Because if you would have told me at the end of the issue where Belial showed up the first time, I think it was like issue 2, that he was an enemy, I would have believed you. But we just decided to do this thing. It looks great. It's a well-drawn book, and it was written fairly well enough. But in terms of the overarching plot, it definitely felt like padding for the sake of padding. So I got to give this one a 6 flat. While I do like certain things it did, it really didn't move the plot forward at all. Save for, we know for a fact the demons didn't do it, which I feel like I didn't exactly need that clarification, but hey, whatever. The Human Bomb number 4, written by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by Jerry Ordway. Last issue, Human Bomb and his telepath friend Joan ended up in an alien base on a moon of Jupiter. I'm not even going to explain how we got there, but we're there now, and this issue is by far like the fastest comic I've ever read that still had words in it. So they're freaking out. They're surrounded by aliens. Human Bomb just starts throwing explosives everywhere. Then he hits the floor, and they start dropping through floor after floor, trying to get away. Finally, they hit some sort of base level, where they see that the aliens are terraforming a vast section of the moon. And they're like, okay, let's just steal a ship, or work their teleportation machine. And Joan is like, that's stupid. We aren't going to be able to figure that crap out. We're going to die here. And so they're stopped in a glass tube tunnel by some aliens, and Human Bomb's like, all right, I'll spin my explosion so that it doesn't hit the walls, but still bombs them. And it works perfectly. And so he suggests, all right, well, if we can't get out of here ourselves, why don't you use your mental abilities to send out a distress signal? And she's like, oh, I mean, I guess that could work, but I've never even imagined trying to link up with another mind from light years away. And I'm going to pause there. I know usually I get through the whole issue before I say anything, but a light year is much, 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 much farther away than how far a moon of Jupiter is to Earth. This is basic Google stuff, man. You Google how far is a light year. Not that damn far. Anyway, she's like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot, I guess. But before they can start doing that, Human Bomb bombs his way into a storage room where apparently these aliens have just kidnapped a whole bunch of NASA stuff, including a fully working spaceship, some lunar modules, and full oxygen tanks along with spacesuits that are fully functioning. So they get into the spacesuits because they think, hey, we might need this in case we're going outside for any reason. And then she sends out her distress signal, basically saying, hey, SOS, anybody who happens to be there. So as she's out of it, one of the aliens fires. It hits Joan through and through, like she's super dead. And Human Bomb's like, no, not while we're this close, you sons of bitches. And he lets that loose this huge explosion that takes out a whole bunch of them. He cradles Joan in his arms and it's just like, oh, you're going to be fine. She's not going to be fine. But she imparts her psychic knowledge and all of her memories into his head so that she's able to possibly have a part in saving his life and the world. And so she says that they're using fuel from the moon's core. There's a drilling shaft that goes all the way into the mantle. Use that to blow up the moon and save the planet. Okay? Do that. And she just lays down Joan's corpse and then proceeds to go on like a 7-page tear where he just goes through and bombs everyone. And he's like, oh, wait a minute. They have jetpacks now. I wish I could fly. And then he thinks, wait a minute, I can explode stuff at my feet too. I've just been using my hands because it feels more natural. So he starts flying up with explosives at his feet. He throws out a bunch of his human bomb stuff at these guys. One of them has a chainsaw, which for some reason gives him trouble, despite the fact that he's a long-range guy. So I don't know what's the problem. And he just blows through him, makes their way to the hole that they cut down to get the fuel out, and he jumps his way into the hole. And when he gets to the bottom, he activates his bomb powers and blows up an entire moon of Jupiter, which he is somehow okay from. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, he isn't damaged by the explosion, because it makes sense, he's not. That's part of his power set. But his suit is 100% fine as well. And as he's drifting in all of the debris, he's like, well, I saved the world, but I'm going to die here. Not a bad way to go. And then Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern, shows up, and he's like, hey, I don't know who you are, but I heard a woman's voice SOSing earlier, so I'm going to save you and bring you back to Earth. Cut to some time later, Michael's waking up. He's getting out of a house. As he walks down a hallway, he sees a bunch of paintings of presidents, and he's like, am I in the White House? And turns out Uncle Sam is there, and he's like, no, you're in the Heartland. And he explains, Green Lantern saved you. You saved the world along with Joan. Her sacrifice will not be in vain. I want you to join our team. And he's like, what team? What's going on? And he introduces Human Bomb to the Ray, Phantom Lady, and Doll Man. And he says, I want a team that's going to fight for our freedom. And then we get a little "the end?" question mark at the end, which the answer is yes. Nothing more was done with the freedom fighters. This is all you will see of them. As for this issue, it makes them... every issue before this felt like it was sprinting. It felt like it was trying to get as much in as humanly possible, as fast as possible, and it didn't give any sort of time for the characters to just be. This issue was one long extended fight scene, but it at least gave time for Michael to monologue and say, oh yeah, I was a soldier. I've always been fighting a war. I've always been doing this. It took the time. I appreciate that. That being said, because they spent so fast sprinting down before, this turned from a thing where, oh, there's a terrorist plot and some people are bombs, like actual bombs themselves. And it made its way to, we're on a moon of Jupiter with an entire alien race. And I gotta think maybe there was an easier story you could have told. Just maybe go back to the drawing board, cut out the alien aspect, and do some other stuff first. Like just normal terrorists. If you're planning on having a USA fighting force called Freedom Fighters, terrorists are an okay way to go. But yeah, it's just... The story as a whole was not what I was expecting, nor what I wanted. The art, however, and what they ended up doing with it was acceptable enough. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a 6, which is kind of just the rating for the series as a whole, but this particular issue, it's got its issues while it also is okay in other rights. So I think a 6 sounds fair enough. But yeah, that is the end of the 4-issue miniseries detailing the Freedom Fighters before they did nothing else, and especially not becoming Freedom Fighters. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this March 6th, 2013. And I know this was like middle of the show, but I also know that you guys skip around a lot because I can see your audience retention. You should be watching everything. But can I just like gush for a second over Green Arrow a little more? It's so good. Like, I really do enjoy it. If you haven't been listening to me cover Green Arrow recently because it was bad for so long, go back and listen. It's so good. Anyway, that is the episode overall. Don't really have much more to talk about, so I guess I'll just tell you about the comics coming out next week. Next week, we have 12 comics, mercifully, and they include the number 18 issues of Batgirl, Batman, Batman and Robin, Superboy, Green Lantern Corps, Deathstroke, Suicide Squad, and Demon Knights. As well, we have Ravagers number 10, Team 7 number 6, Threshold number 3, and Katana number 2. So it's a literal grab bag. We got some Batman in there, we got some Demon Knights in there, and then we got Team 7 and Katana on the other side of that. So take your pick, I guess. I, unfortunately, have to sit through it all. So maybe you can tell me in the comments why I should sit through it all. Or hit me up on any one of our other social media platforms like Twitter, Discord, or Patreon. What's that? Patreon isn't a social media platform? Screw you, pay me. So, yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching, listening, however it is you consume this podcast. I hope to see you in the next episode. And as always, try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.